So welcome everyone, bienvenue tout le monde. It's not an easy task to go after a very emotional panel, so I hope you're all taking care of yourselves. If at any point you still need to leave the room or grab a time for yourself, please do as you must. So you're here for the Spill the Tea panel. So we're talking about drag queens. How fun is that, right? That we are at a summit where we can talk about drag queens who are trailblazers in our communities for so many decades. Not only about that, but you'll see. Spill the Tea is a drag intervention fighting the stigma associated with drug use, sex, and HIV, led by MAX Ottawa in partnership with ViV Healthcare. This innovative community intervention provides safer partying materials and HIV STTBI testing referrals to GBT2Q guys who engage in party and play. So today the panelists will speak to the successes and challenges of creating and delivering this community-based intervention and offer adaptable tips to deliver this intervention within your own communities. My name is Roberto Ortiz. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the Executive Director of MAX Ottawa. We operate in unsurrendered and unceded Algonquin territories. So what we propose for today, we're going to show a short video, and then I'll introduce more in detail our amazing panelists, David, Robert, Devona, and Matthew. And we're going to have a conversation. So this is more of a talk show kind of panel that we're going to do. We're also going to have, towards the second part of the panel, an open conversation, so you will be welcome to jump in, ask questions, just share what the experiences you have in your communities. And hopefully, towards the end, you'll leave this room with ideas on how something like this might or might not work in your communities and how to make it happen. Also, you'll find in some of the tables, maybe all of them, a flyer that was put together with the team with some tips on how to, it's a guide of how to make your own Spill the Tea in your community. So this is a first draft. We're happy to hear feedback, and we're going to have a more comprehensive version on our website, maxottawa.ca/spillthetea. So without more, let's start with a video. Play video, please.
So MAX has an event called Spill the Tea. We've done 3 of them so far, and it's essentially a educational party, and then we have a whole bunch of local performers, and we talk about harm reduction, we talk about drag, and we have fun, and we talk about how you can reduce stigma through awareness. We break down Max's party kits, and we really have a really fun time explaining who we are to our community.
So Spill the Tea came about through a partnership with MAX Ottawa and ViV Healthcare. Through this partnership, MAX was able to make this a very Ottawa-specific initiative.
With Spill the Tea, MAX Ottawa and Capital Pride partnered together in 2018 during Pride Week to host the first Spill the Tea event. We really saw this opportunity to support MAX Ottawa in their goal to raise awareness around safer partying, education around party and play. So we really wanted to partner in also reducing the stigma that's associated with PNP, party and play.
First, building a Safer Party Advisory Committee, which is our team of guys and guys who participate in the chemsex.
It helps us build out our kind of programming that's informed by the express needs and desires of people who have that experience. So it satisfies a lot of different things that are needed, including experience, lived experience, expertise that comes from that experience, and accountability.
The Safer Party Advisory Committee informed MAX, and through this wonderful partnership that Capital Pride was able to later join, and also Somerset West, we were able to create a really bold and fun initiative. Talking about sexual health, talking about harm reduction, talking about pleasure and fun. So that was one thing that really came through the Safer Party Advisory Committee, is why they participate in party and play is because they're having these really wonderful, unique, one-of-a-kind experiences.
The real key measure of success is that people started talking about it and breaking down the barriers.
I think it's a really unique avenue to go down to have like a nightclub event where we're also talking about education and awareness. And it kind of blends these two really important things, having fun and being aware, into this really fun thing called Spill the Tea.
Thank you. So David is originally from Montreal, and he currently lives in Ottawa. Since the age of 16, he has volunteered at various AIDS service organizations and LGBTQ+ organizations with a harm reduction focus. He presently shares his lived experience and knowledge of party and play to MAX's Safer Partying Advisory Committee and as a MAX volunteer. So David, we'll start with you. Tell us, why do you think an intervention like Spill the Tea is important for you and your communities?
I think that we need information out there so that people could party on a safer basis. I've been a party person since I was 21 years old. I've learned how to party safer and how to keep my participants that are in my house better organize and keep them safe. And I've learned that it's the best way, and information is so important in the community, and we don't talk enough about party and play because it's so stigmatized. You talk about ecstasy, it's a party drug, yes, but if you talk about crystal meth, you're banned from sites, you're deleted from profiles, there's people that will disassociate you without you. And so this is one reason why I decided to talk about it and be honest about it and keep the conversation going. Because there's a lot of people that are going to do drugs. I'd rather see, if people are going to do drugs, I'd rather see people do drugs safer and keep their participants safe. And that's the reasons why I brought this up to MAX organization. It just turned into this wonderful event.
Thank you, David. Robert is the Communications and Outreach Coordinator at MAX. He brings 10 years of nursing experience, volunteering with LGBTQ+ organizations, a strong passion for health equity, and lived experience as a Black queer male to this role. Robert, same question. Why do you think an intervention like this is important for you and MAX or organizations?
Spill the Tea has been really important. I think the best example that I have is 2 weeks ago, I was in the office by myself, and I happened to look up from my computer. There was a young man standing there, and he just very directly looked at me and said, "Hey, I'm here to pick up some of those Spill the Tea party kits," which I was happy to give. But afterwards, I really reflected on and thoughts about this panel of what does it mean to be a frontline community-based organization, and what that really involves is trust. And the layers of trust that this young man had to, however he found out about this information, to know that he could come to us and know that he wouldn't be judged, to get what he needed, that he could have any questions answered. And I don't know of any better example to explain why interventions like this are important.
Thanks, Robert. Devona is a drag queen and Ottawa native. Turning new looks every week, she performs at The Lookout on a regular basis and has performed with some of Canada's top talent in multiple cities such as Toronto, Montreal, and Quebec City, and Vancouver yesterday. She expands the horizons of Ottawa drag by consistently trying new things and hosting queens from other cities at her shows in order to develop our inner community. Devona, why do you think Spill the Tea is an important intervention?
So I grew up in a very small town about 2 hours north of Ottawa, where gay LGBTQ issues really weren't a thing. There was a lot of homophobia related in that area, so I didn't come out until I moved to Ottawa when I was about 20 years old. And at that point, what happens is you come out and you experience the teens that you should have experienced in your 20s. And when you're doing that, you make a lot of bad decisions because you have a lot more freedom than you had in those times. So whether it's having sex without a condom, drug use, whatever it might be, we all make bad decisions in our life. And I think what Spill the Tea does is it really connects communities and people who are new in the community into how to do things safely. Because if I had the knowledge of where to get tested when I was 20, I was really lucky to have got out of this scot-free. But people make bad decisions, and when I went to my general practitioner to get tested, he was just like, oh, what kind of sex did you have? And there was so much stigma related into that, like gay sex, STI check. So what Max did is they connected me with the right people that wouldn't judge, and that's what Spill the Tea does, is it really just communicates knowledge into a sector, and why we brought drag queens into it is because we're leaders in our community. So literally on a weekly basis, I'll have a message on my Instagram of someone asking, hey, I know you run that Spill the Tea event, where do I get safe, like drug use apparatus? Where do I get tested and not be judged? So even if it's not a direct educational piece in the moment, it creates that open conversation for people to do it later.
Thank you. Matthew Halse is the Manager, Community Relations and Communications at Vive Healthcare Canada, an HIV-dedicated company. Matthew previously served as the Executive Director of AIDS Community Care Montreal and Instructor of Sexuality Studies at the University of Western Ontario. Matthew, why is Spill the Tea important?
Spill the Tea is important because, so I'm a bit of an outsider to the process of Spill the Tea. And one of the things that I value about it is that it is exactly the kind of community programming that happens when you drop the kind of BS of funding models and stuff like that. It is what happened when you empower a group of people to come together across, we saw Davey from Pride making an HIV queer issue. We saw a users committee who was so dynamic and so informative. And we saw a cross-functional staff that brought different perspectives into it. And when you sort of drop the infrastructure and drop the requirements of maybe what a funder requires, you get so much more creativity. And so one of the things that beyond the interventions and beyond the sort of life-saving information or life-affirming information, one of the things that it shows is just how strong activism is in Ottawa and how much it can redefine what it means to participate in queer life.
Thank you. So part of these intervention, like it all starts with a need. And I want to start with you again, Matthew, because you kind of helped as a matchmaker with Spill the Tea, because you listened to the need that was expressed from Ottawa communities and organizations, and you kind of connected the dots with opportunities. Can you share a bit of how that happened?
You kind of make me sound like a dating service. I mean, I'll take it. So basically, there's kind of three things there. So the mundane story is that the company that I work for, Vive, we're turning 10 actually on Monday. I legitimately ordered birthday cake. And for the first time in our careers, or in our company's history rather, we have institutional memory. And so the mundane kind of story is that we were encouraged to look to what different Vive local operating companies did that worked and kind of mimic it. So there was a Berlin program called Let's Talk and Test, which is a very un-Berlin title. And they used drag to do HIV testing, and that was great. But the real story is that Roberto and I had had a conversation the week before that wasn't about funding, that wasn't about our organizations, that wasn't about sort of our own individual agendas, and it was about a recent survey that they had done that showed an increase in prevalence of crystal meth use and folks who just needed information to do it safely and to be affirmed in who they are and what they do. And it's because we had that conversation that had nothing to do with our organizations, that had nothing to do with pitches or whatever, that we were able to think about pairing one with the other. And that was awesome. The only other thing that I kind of want to mention there that I think that we brought to the table in that conversation that gave birth to Spill the Tea is that it just started as an idea, but it also started, as I alluded before, as a desire to sort of jettison the BS that comes with funding. There's something that's happening in Canada right now to our HIV services organizations that we're trying to fit interventions into a funding box. And lives aren't spreadsheets. And there's tremendous activist capacity in this country that tends to be dulled because of bad funding models. And so one of the things that I wanted to do internally at Vive is to challenge ourselves as a funder to think about what happens when we do an intervention that doesn't have that. When we say to the executive director of an organization, you have an idea, here's a check, let's kind of go do it. It's not quite that simple, but it was a different form of funding. And so what we've used internally is to be able to start doing more of those. And And I'm proud to say that this is now kind of our norm, which is awesome.
And so the survey that you were talking about, so MAX, for those who don't know, we're a young organization with, we incorporated only in 2014, and we launched with the new brand and with programs and services in 2017. And when we launched, we had before we launched, we had created a community engagement committee with different guys from the Ottawa communities and that represented or that brought to the table different lived experiences, as well as we had a mental health partnership table with service providers that worked in different sectors serving our communities in mental health and related. And in both tables, there were questions around party and play. Both were like, there's gaps, where do I get access to? Some like, is that really a thing in Ottawa? Like we hear that's a thing in other places, but is it really happening in Ottawa? So that's when the survey that Matthew mentioned was done with the support and the encouragement of the Community Engagement Committee, and Matthew, who works with the Community Engagement Committee, helped that happen in a very quickly and useful way, because sometimes we have a great support of researchers that work with us, but sometimes we need information really quick to make things happen. So we made an online survey. And then, so very quickly we heard, and then I'm gonna go with you, Robert, because we heard that was a thing. It was happening in Ottawa, party and play, including crystal meth. So we're like, let's start the conversation. And we very quickly learned from our mistakes, because we're like, oh, it's happening, let's have a conversation. Robert, can you tell about that experience? Because sometimes we don't share enough the things that don't work, and we can learn from those as well.
So at MAX, we have Behind the Scene, which is a monthly educational program we do in partnership with the Ottawa Hospital. One of the topics that we addressed was with Daniel LaRoche from the Contact Project in Montreal. We brought him down as a guest speaker, and we, in hindsight, had a very poorly worded, bad imagery event called Meth and Sex that was very poorly attended. I think we had 2 or 3 people outside of staff. And while it was a great presentation, what we also found out from our Instagram story is that there was about 150, almost 200 people that followed the story. So we knew that people were interested, but we realized that we made a mistake in the way that we packaged and we're trying to sell this conversation to the community.
So when when Spill the Tea, before it was called Spill the Tea, was going to happen, and we knew that we were going to have funding, the first thing learning from that mistake is we need to have a Safer Partying Advisory Committee. So we started with a focus group so that we could have from the beginning the perspective, the experience, the expertise of members in our community who engage in party and play. So I want to hear now David and Robert as well talk to how from the beginning with that focus group that after became the committee, how this engagement from the beginning and those conversations helped shape the intervention.
I'm trying to think.
Yeah, do you remember that focus group and how that conversation happened?
Yeah, we decided to go with Spill the Tea because we played on the words tea because we knew that we could not use the word crystal meth in the community because it would be not a good word and people would shy away from the whole situation. For me, Spill the Tea, it was a fantastic name. It became our brand. It became what we wanted it to be. And for me, I'm so happy to have been be part of the advisory board. And it was something that I needed to do in order for our community to understand that, yes, people do party. And we need people to be speaking out about drug use in our community because we're so shy about talking about it and we're so stigmatized about everything. And this is how it became part of the organization, part of our event.
Robert?
Yeah, for sure. And speaking as the main facilitator, so as you said, we initially started off with a general focus group. We invited it was really open to any guy into guy. If you've participated in chemsex at least once in the last year, to join. We have 5 initial members of the Party Advisory Committee. We started off with the focus group, and we realized that we wanted to continue this conversation. So that later became the Safer Party Advisory Committee for that missing piece. But one of the things that was really just left a really strong impression for me is how excited and willing the guys in the committee were. They really engaged in a space that I've never seen before, of just wanting to be honest, wanting to have a platform to speak about what chemsex, what PNP looked like, what they needed and what they wanted as a community to be safer. And they were also really honest about other structural issues. You know, the racism that's prevalent in the PNP community, the certain stigma that there is around certain drugs versus others, which was really important.
And one of the things as well at the beginning, when we were creating the intervention and what we were hearing in the Safer Partying Advisory Committee, the importance of having the hostess of the space, because we very quickly thought with the Safer Partying Advisory Committee advice that bringing a RuPaul's drag queen was going to bring us people inside the room, and then once they were captive, we could, you know, we can bring some of the messages that the Safer Partying Advisory Committee and MAX had worked together. One of the missing pieces at the beginning was that we couldn't identify, for the first edition, a local drag queen who was comfortable talking about harm reduction, safer partying. So we had, for the first event, guest drag queens, one from Montreal, one from Toronto, to host bilingually, who knew about Party and Play, who are community workers from a lot of years. So they could bring that to the first one, but we didn't want to keep bringing queens from other cities to host. We wanted to build capacity, and coincidentally, we crossed paths that, like, during those weeks when we were having those discussions with Devona, who came forward and say, "Hey, Max looks awesome," and you tell us the story, Devona.
So literally Pride 2 summers ago, they announced Spill the Tea with Shea Coulee. It was the first event of its kind, and I thought it was really cool. I really related to it from my experiences as coming out just recently, about a year prior to that. So I thought it was a genius idea, and I really just wanted to be part of it. So I sent Max an Instagram message, and that's what it was. But as a drag queen, you're a leader in the gay community, and you have a platform, and not only is it a platform, you have a responsibility to promote health within your own community. You have to make sure that anyone who comes to you, you can lead them to the right place that they need to be. If you have any platform in your community, whether you're from Saskatoon, Ottawa, Halifax, it doesn't matter, you need to be able to tell your community where to go when they're in need. And that's basically why I wanted to join Spill the Tea with Max. Yeah, that's it.
And Devona, could you add, because it wasn't only you expressed interest through Instagram and then that was it, you spent a lot of hours with our harm reduction support coordinator learning and training yourself.
Yeah, so since I was just a college student in marketing, I have no relation to the health fields. I didn't know anything about harm reduction and how to go about it on an actual physical standpoint. And since I reached out to them, they put me in contact with their 2 hostesses, Anaconda and my Kiki. One was from Montreal, one was from Toronto. And we actually met up, and they taught me a little bit about how I can advocate for safe partying, safe sex within my community, and how I can be that platform for change through them, which was really cool. I learned so much. They taught me everything about how to host the Spill the Teas in the future, and I hosted 2 since. And now we're out here in Vancouver. We did one last night, which was super successful at the Junction, and we had a lot of fun. So basically all that to say, make change, learn as much as you can, build a community.
Thank you. Some of the aspects as well, as you saw in the video, was partnerships. So from the beginning as well, we knew that MAX Ottawa was not going to be doing, you know, testing, or was not going to do all of the harm reduction services that were needed. So we were going to need important partnerships. So Matthew, I want to send that to you, that question, on how partnerships and purposeful and thinking outside of the box and not always the usual suspects is important for an intervention like this one.
Absolutely. So it's not preaching to the choir kind of model. So in reality, there were two different kind of partnerships, and this is what I really encourage within, if you do choose to build this program on your own. The first is they were wildly successful. They were community partners within Ottawa, often serving guys who are into guys, but who are not strictly within the HIV realm. So that's with Capital Pride and making HIV a part of the Pride Festival. That's with Somerset and having that kind of medical knowledge. But it was also inviting things like folks who were engaging in harm reduction techniques or distributing safer partying supplies on their own and bringing them into the matrix and inviting them and giving them space within the club that the events were held at. And that worked beautifully because what it ended up doing is A, you're bringing in a different audience, but B, you're bringing in different perspectives on the same problem. Not problem, but the same sort of issue. And so the key to this kind of event was like, how big can we build this tent? The other form of partnership that went really well was a communications campaign that kind of went around it. It wasn't a named campaign, it wasn't posters or something like that. It was giving voice to the folks who were engaged in the program from a media lens. Part of that was through, you met Nick here before from Impact Public Affairs and Vive, but part of it was like, how much noise can we make from this great program? And so one of the things that we did with the Queens, both local and the RuPaul's Queens, for occasionally better, for worse. I love a drag queen, but sometimes it's a bit of a mixed bag in terms of speaking points. But what we decided to do is like, how are we bringing this program to the CBC? How are we bringing this program to media outlets to tell the story to a much wider audience? And it worked out spectacularly. Angina in particular, who did the first one, was able to go out there and tell her story to a fantastic audience. And all it took was handing her a megaphone or handing her a microphone. And I don't think that we do that enough in our programming. And so that kind of partnership that thinks beyond the event itself worked spectacularly.
Now that you're talking about that, you want to share about also the lunch event where we had Vive, Impact, Capital Pride, and some elected officials join as well.
Absolutely. So you saw a little bit, one of the things that we said was also how do we change culture within the context of Vive. And so we also, we did a big condom packing party, which is super great. And so the mayor came, local elected officials came, including community councillors and stuff like that. But things like the Canadian Federation of Students was there. Like, how cool is that they wanted to implicate themselves? And so we had one kind of event like that served not only as a media launching pad, but also as a capacity building, for folks internally at my organization to build those condom packs in conjunction with volunteers and the MAX staff and a whole bunch of others. But the other thing that works really well is that we did a sort of a discussion on HIV and substance use from a scientific kind of background. And so we had a pharmacist come in internally who talked about interactions between antiretrovirals and street drugs. And so there was a sort of a larger umbrella of capacity building and communal learning that I also think folded really well into the more public side of Spill the Tea.
Mm-hmm. And maybe some of you are wondering, like, you saw some photos, we're talking about it, there's a video, but maybe you're still like what exactly happens at the party? Like, you come inside the venue, like, how does it happen? How does it play out? So maybe Robert and Devona can explain, like, just guide us through how a night of Spill the Tea happens. Like, how is it?
Sure. I'll just very quickly start is that during the Safer Party Advisory Committees, the meetings is that they told us what they wanted the party to look like, what the key messages were. So it was, Max's and our partners' job to kind of bring that to life. And also speaking of partnerships, being really fortunate to work with a venue owner that was really calm and collected. We were like, can we bring in harm reduction class? He's like, yes. Can we make the washrooms gender neutral? Yes. Like, he didn't care. In a very good way, which helped. But walking into the Spill the Tea, we greeted folks with a resource list, what the key messages of the party were. We had harm reduction tables. We had infotainment, which Devona will speak more to. We had an anonymous HIV worker there who was there to talk to folks, get them connected, make appointments. Of course, we had harm reduction supplies and condoms throughout the venue. So it was really just thinking about all angles. And also, if anyone was at the Youth Co event last night, Spill the Tea here, there was key messages that were on the wall. So it was really just about plastering it every which way we could so folks knew that they were there to have fun, but also learn.
So one of the key elements of Spill the Tea was, while hosting in between our numbers, I would actually dissect our party kits. And what the MAX party kits are is inside you have everything you need to have safe sex, safe drug use, everything you need for that basic moment. It's the size of a pencil case, so you can put it in your back pocket. There's no actual labeling on it, so there's no stigma. And everyone in the audience, when I'm dissecting it and showing people what's in it, one of the key messages that I always want to get across is that you personally might not ever need the supplies in this kit, but your best friend might, but your sister's brother, whoever, someone that you know might need this. So that's one of the key things that, because people have that standoffish vibe of, oh, I'll never need that, so they stop listening. But it's the same thing as being a gay ally as a straight person. Being an ally to people who are partiers and making sure that you can give them the information for them to do it safely is really key in this event, and just, it's about spreading knowledge and gaining awareness.
Thank you. And you were talking about the pencil cases. That's because you helped us host the second and third. The first event, the party kits were not that successful. So maybe David, you can help us talk, because at the Safer Partying Advisory Committee, you guide us to like, that was a terrible idea in the first one. A cake box is not the most discreet and useful. So can you please guide us on how in those discussions you were able to, after every party, get the messages and the kits and the event better and better?
What we did was we decided that it would be better to put all the information and all the kits into what's it called? School, like a pencil case, and it was much better in that sense of, because then you could put it in your pocket and nobody knows about it. And I've actually have brought many pencil cases home to my place, and I've actually given them out in my party scene and things like that. And people have actually asked me for it. And I've had a lady that was beside me that does crack, and I asked her about, does she use pipes, and does she share pipes? And she said, yes, I do. I said, well, that's not a good idea. So I gave her a whole bunch of pipes. I gave her information on how to, how to party on a safer level. And I think this is one of the best event. One of the best things is the pencil cases, because then it keeps it private, and you're not showing people what it's all about.
So, David, sometimes as well, a lot of people have the idea or think that guys who engage in party and play are lonely and might not have enough friends and connections. But really, what we heard from the Safer Partying Advisory Committee, and the idea as well behind the event, is to sort of like break down those ideas and also bring forward the idea that people who engage in party and play build communities, take care of each other. So can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Yes, I've actually found many friends by partying and play. And it's been interesting. I've had some good relationships and some bad ones. I've also made it clear that I don't want people that are coming into my household and that are going to bring negativity in. If you're going to bring negativity, I'd rather you leave it at the door. And I want people to party on a safer level, so I give them all the information. And it's developed a lot of good friendships and good community base also. For me, it's something to talk about, because stigma is still there, and I'm trying to break down that stigma and trying to say, okay, yes, we all party, but at the same time, we need to be safe and need to protect ourselves and each other and party on a safer level. And this is one reason why I've actually done what I've done. And I've learned many years ago, joined Black and Blue, which is in a circuit party in Montreal, I was part of the organizing committee for 13 years. And I've taken all that information and have brought it, I've used that information on my own party place situation. I've never got in trouble with the law. I kept my household safe. I kept participants safe. That's how come I've done what I've been doing, and I keep doing the work that I'm doing.
Thanks, David. Robert, one of the things that the Safer Partying Advisory Committee brought forward as well, they wanted to make sure, and you touched on this briefly, that the events, that the intervention was accessible, was diverse, was inclusive. Can you please speak to how it was made on purpose and what were the efforts and the ideas to make that happen?
Yeah, sure. Specifically with the branding, I'll never forget that meeting because also a good example of how sometimes as organizations or as the employee you have to get out of the way because we had ideas of what we wanted the brand to be, but when we went into that meeting, the Safer Party Advisory Committee was very clear about what they wanted, which was still funny to me. But Spill the Tea was very intentional. I always get emotional when I see this logo because it was brought forth with passion. They were very adamant in having something that was visible, that was they could use for future branding. The T represents truth. The T represents Tina, obviously. It was something that they felt confident that other community members who participate in the scene would recognize in making it Ottawa specific. But particularly beyond the logo, as we were mentioning before about the party kits, they wanted, we started off with a huge cake box that had tons of supplies, but they were very clear, and particularly with the unique stigma around injection use, to separate those. So if you go to the website, there's pictures of the party kits there, maxottawa.ca/spill-the-tea. Also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To keep those separate. So there's an injection one and an inhalation one. And that was intentional so that folks who felt that stigma around injection use that didn't have to access it or pick it up. Yeah, and gonna kind of start repeating myself, but yeah, they were just very informative in how to make this as accessible and as broad to people as well. And also, they were also very protective of Max's brand, which I also found really interesting in terms of the things that they report and making sure there was a very much a vested interest in making sure that Max wouldn't do anything that would be too controversial or too crossing the line or bring up a negative image. So also having some discretion, which I thought was really impactful.
Thanks, Robert. And I think as well, and maybe Devona, because you helped us a lot in the second and third event particularly, but also one of the kind of ideas brought forward from Safer Partying Advisory Committee is that the lineup, they wanted to make sure that it was diverse, right? We didn't only want to have, the white drag queens from RuPaul that get lots of thousands of dollars, but we wanted to have some representation in the lineup as well. Can you speak a bit about that?
So one of the really important things with not only Spill the Tea but any drag show is diversity, because by showing diversity in a cast lineup, you're also showing diversity to your audience. So by bringing in a queen of color, any diverse drag queen, it allows us to really touch more people than we would have before. Our second drag queen that we had from RuPaul was Angina, and she's actually HIV positive. And she had the moment to speak about that, and she had like a solid speak on stage about like real talk and how stigmatized she was being on the show and afterwards, and how she lives her life going forward. And I think that was probably one of our most impactful Spill the Teas was with Angina, because our headliner was directly related to the people in the audience. She was directly in that scene, and that was one of the reasons why I believe that was really successful. And another reason why having a diverse drag lineup was really important is because since that, we've actually created a different thing with Max with the drag queen awareness program that we've been doing, which we're essentially training local drag queens, kings, performers, AFAB performers, whatever they may be, on how they can be an asset to their community and the safety of their community. So we'll do trainings about once a month whenever we get enough people signed up, that will actually teach drag performers how and where to connect people in their cities. So whenever they get a message on Instagram, someone comes up to them at the club and asks where they can get a condom. Whenever they ask where they can get tested, they have that knowledge and they can go back to that person and give them a proper answer.
And I just want to add too, what was really powerful too about the second show that we had with Angina is that you had done a lineup and brought in Charlie DeVille, who's a drag queen from Montreal. I'm sorry, drag king, yes, which is the point. And so there was a lot of hugs given at that event because there was a lot of gender diverse, non-binary, a lot of trans guys into guys who knowing that Charlie was going to be at the event made them more comfortable in coming. And we also to build a lot more trust in that community, knowing that we had a very diverse cast.
Whenever you book a drag king, you're showing inclusivity to trans people, you're showing inclusivity to women who might be an ally, you're showing that you are a friend to the people of your community and not just the cisgendered white men. So even other than Spill the Tea at all my events, I always try to book AFAB performers, queens of color, drag kings. You have to make your events diverse because drag kings and any other performer that's not a cisgendered white man, they're not given the platform that we are. So as a cisgendered white man who is a drag queen, I have made it my effort to always book a diverse cast, to always book those people so that the people in the audience also feel included in my show.
Thank you. So before speaking, we already got a trailer of what's next with these trainings that we've started doing with drag queens. That way, even if the series ended, the 3 big events, the message is still out there in the sort of like natural and organic spaces where guys and guys meet and socialize. But before going a bit more further in what's next and some of the lessons learned, I want to turn the mic back to you to start some conversations and dialogue and see what your questions and your comments are in the audience.
It didn't end very well. I was a meth addict for about 12 years, and I really wish you guys were around back then, probably because, you know, I've seen other people during my career shoot up with pond water or use, you know, very harmful materials in order to achieve their high. So you guys are perfectly placed to talk about addiction. So I'm just wondering what you could have, how you could have helped me. I didn't start with meth. I started with, you know, MDMA, Split K, GHB, all that kind of stuff. But in having conversations, I'm so glad that there are conversations now because I think that would have helped me or maybe altered my course. But how would Max have advised me or talked to me so I would not have been practically dead 7 years ago?
You mind if I answer? Thank you for your question. It's really powerful. And as you know, harm reduction is really about meeting people where they're at. So, you know, whether that be not starting drugs, cessation, but Spill the Tea was really kind of aimed at the middle, guys and the guys who want to do it safer and have access to, you know, clean supplies and proper knowledge. But certainly MAX as an organization, part of our goal is to be a hub of credible and reliable resources. So if cessation or was part, we have other services such as our mental health navigation service. We have a closed MAX group that's called After the Party that specifically focuses on trying to reconnect socially and sexually after quitting crystal meth. So really it would have been about where you were at and what you needed and how we can get you the services that you would have needed.
So if somebody's using other substances but not meth, do you have a conversation about that? Because it seemed like that was the hook that got me, you know, where I ended up.
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, one of the things, you know, while Spill the Tea was kind of specifically focused on PNP and getting HIV tested, we really kind of kept it broad and just keeping to guys and the guys who are using substances to enjoy sex, to also try to encompass those other drugs. And also, as we've grown as an organization, so has our harm reduction supplies. So as you saw in the video, there were sorting kits, we had GHB kits, safer booty pumping kits. So those are all things that have come as a result of that program, and also our relationship with Ottawa Public Health, and also as my amazing coworker, Matthew, who leads a lot of those conversations in getting those.
And I'll jump in a bit about that, because I think one of the gaps that we identified from the beginning was gaps in services and spaces to have these conversations, to have peer support. So that is definitely a challenge that has to be discussed, because sometimes it's very important to have conversations and raise awareness, but where are we referring to? What are the spaces and the options that we are providing folks who want to speak about, or any kind of way they want to go into talking about substance use or sex. So one of the things that have been happening in parallel, because we've been working with partners and ourselves, we do offer a mental health navigation service. That was one of our first services, and our peer navigator has an intake with a person, and that was also one of the observations that brought us to Spill the Tea, because he had noticed that there were a lot of guys that came and talked about different mental health realities that were connected sometimes to party and play. So he thought that by opening that conversation, people would feel, would have a closer relationship and trust with MAX to come and maybe have this mental health navigation and be connected. There's the anxiety group and the after the party groups that are inspired by ACT Toronto's groups that were developed. So indeed, it's very important to create those spaces. We've noticed that in Ottawa, most of the support spaces are abstinence-based. And so with the Safer Partying Advisory Committee and with some other organizations, we're looking into creating some drop-in spaces where guys can connect. So we're connecting with guys, with folks in Toronto who we piloted the Kiki, which is a cool space that we think might be able to work in Ottawa. So I think those conversations and efforts are indeed very important to be working at the same time, because it's harm reduction in the terms of giving out materials is very important, but there might be other spaces and options that guys want as well.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone wants to add anything to that, or we go to the next question, Andrew?
I'm not going to make any friends by my comment, but since I only see you all once a year, I hope you'll forget by next year. We've had a lot of references today to diversity, ethnicity, and white men. And I'm thrilled that we have an audience at this event that's much more diverse than the first time I came to it 12 years ago. We're definitely making progress. But I sense, and maybe it's me taking it personally as a gay white man who came out in the late 1970s in the San Francisco Bay Area, where it really wasn't all that possible for African Americans, for Asian Americans, or even for Latino Americans to a certain extent, to be out on the front lines because of religious reasons in the Afro-American community and in the Latino-American community, and just the whole kind of privacy related to what was mainly a Chinese-American community in the Bay Area. But, we marched, the thing that sticks in my mind, because it was after Stonewall, there was an initiative that looked like it was going to pass to outlaw gay and lesbian teachers in the public school system, which was interesting because where would they find teachers, for goodness sakes? But the march was mainly Caucasian because it was safer for me living across the country from the rest of my family to do it. And I certainly didn't begrudge the lack of participation of my Black, Latino, and Asian American colleagues mainly known to me through my work at United Way. And I just would like us to be a little more gentle about that. In the same way we've just celebrated Stonewall, there's a history to this movement that's got us to the diversity we have. And maybe it isn't a put down every time this is mentioned, but I feel lessened. And, you know, I don't think that's what we should be about. I think we should be building on our successes and glorying in the diversity we have now managed to bring into the room. Thank you.
I see your point, and I definitely see where you're coming from. And I think it's about respecting our history and thanking the people who have built the footsteps for us. But also, I have to say, coming from a drag queen perspective, when I go back to Ottawa or Toronto, 90% of the shows are strictly white drag queens. So it's about checking your own privilege currently and saying, yes, I should be booking a more diverse cast. And just having total respect for all the white men that have built our Stonewall, that have built our pathway, having respect for the black trans people who have grown our path as well, and having respect for the current amount of people who don't feel included, and making sure that they feel included going forward.
And I don't mean to in any way imply that those early days were entirely white. There were people who came out from ethno-minority communities in the Bay Area who really put their lives on the line, but quite honestly, back in the day, there wasn't, even in the San Francisco Bay Area or the university town of Berkeley where I lived, there wasn't exactly safety in coming out. But you know, there were leaders, and in an interesting way, because California has always had such a heavy Hispanic influence, I worked a lot with, interestingly, Latinas rather than Latinos, but there was a little bit more freedom just because the benefit of numbers, I guess.
Thanks, Andrew. Anyone else wants to add? Thank you. Yes.
Without it, but we don't need to introduce ourselves or anything, do we? You don't want any of that kind of crap? Matthew, nice to see you. We're everywhere. First of all, I love the Spill the Tea logo. Just want to say that. I was going to spill the high tea, just because of my English background. But I'm really curious. Great events, great concept. I'm looking at the positivity tour that's going around Slay the Stigma. Same concept, I think, kind of thing going on, which was in Calgary, which I loved. I'm curious to know, though, when we're doing all this harm reduction talk and all of this talk about safer party and play and stuff like that, are we also including treating each other better? Are we having the conversation sorry, we're really good at kicking the shit out of each other. And we seem to forget that drugs include poppers, drugs include marijuana, they include GHB, they include alcohol. We've been using substances as gay guys forever. And we need to stop pigeonholing ourselves as that drug is worse than that drug and that person's worse than that drug. I see this in our community across the way, and I would really like to know if you've managed to pull that in, if there's a plan to pull that in, and someone else has another question I'm going to ask on their behalf because they didn't want to come up here, I don't think. Why only 3, and are you planning to do more?
So I'm not going to take the last question because that one gives me heart palpitations. But I can tell you one thing. So one of the benefits that I've had in this process is that the real heavy lifting was Max, and so I had the absolute pleasure of hanging out with them and just experiencing it. And one of the things that I noticed is because it's not a program in a box, and because it's not a program that has this kind of predetermined formula, it's, you know, the drags do their thing, there's some speaking notes, there's some training, but you just do it. And you invite a lot of people, and if people want to come, they come, and if the orgs want to participate, they participate, and that kind of thing. And because you've dropped the bullshit, I've never seen love in a room like that at a harm reduction event in my life. And that's the magic of it, and that's also why people kept coming back, and they basically all sold out, including last night. And so my advice and that's sort of what I was talking about before, about sort of jettisoning the metrics in favor of sort of reaching and meeting people where they're at, is when you start valuing humans and when you start affirming who they are. And that's not just the starting point, but that's the entire point. You end up having this beautiful event, and it's love.
And just to comment too, to piggyback off of that, is that the Safer Party Advisory Committee really brought that care into, I mean, from the door, and that's what it was about, how they were taking care of each other and how they wanted to share it. And you really saw that in the themes that they created. So we started with Spill the Tea, then the second one was Spill the Tea Connections, that's what it was about making these connections, whether you're doing drugs or not, how do you take care of each other? And then our last one was Share the Tea. So take all this knowledge and spread it out to the community. And that was all from the community.
So I think we had a question there, no? Yeah. Okay, it's good. So then we're gonna go here, and then we're gonna start wrapping up.
I probably don't need a microphone either. I am from the Public Health Agency of Canada, so super jazzed to hear more about programming outside of a box, but more about, because every time this comes up, we discuss it all the time, like how do we, encourage innovation in different funding proposals that we're getting, and we kind of get the same kind of thing all the time. We want to see new stuff, and this is really cool, and it's grassroots, and so how do we, more kind of like what key challenges did you face as a funder, like around giving that freedom, but not letting others push you to try to put it back in a box? Like how did you push back? Because that's what we need advice on.
Could you define pushback in that sentence?
I would guess around reporting, around what's your objective, around what are your activities, around all the funding BS that comes with, like the box. Like how do you get rid of the box and not have the heat kind of come down from other people? It's different for us because we're government, but just.
Is this a Matthew question?
I think that's a Matthew question.
Hi, yeah, I know. And I was trying to share at the ground. Okay, so here's the thing, is that so out of the box, first of all, let's take it with a slight grain of salt. Drag queens have been leading activism since time immemorial, telling people that they're loved as the social interventions happen time immemorial. It's just so that this exact combination is a bit unique. So there's that. But the second of all is, it's easy for me to say because I work for a private company, I can kind of do my thing. But one of the things that, because I also led an ASO for a while, and I've worked in things, and I've worked with PIAC, and I'm saying this with a lot of love, is that when you impose your view on other people as a funder, you're doing a disservice to your community. And so one of the things that MAX has pushed us to do is to listen a lot more as a funder, and to acknowledge the people at MAX, acknowledge the users committee as experts in their field and as experts in their communities that they serve. And so my duty, both as a pharma company, my duty as just a human, my duty as the gayest human being, is to say, like, how can I make it easier for you? And so when you asked about reporting and things like that, there's really not much. It's gonna be a page and a half. We reduced our reporting this year to 4 questions. We just wanna know that what you said you did, or what you said you would do happened, but whatever you say you want to do, that's up to you to decide and not the agency. Does that answer your question? Right.
Thank you. Do we have the question back there, or we start wrapping up here? Wrap up. Okay. So we have only very few minutes left, so we're gonna go with each one of you, and if in a very short way, you can tell us what was the main lesson that you learned with Spill the Tea and what it has meant to you. We'll start with Devona.
So what Spill the Tea taught me was that my community had needs that I didn't know that it needed. And then I learned that I had a platform to teach them about those needs and how they can access it. So to wrap up, in all essence, it taught me how to get my message, which is Max's message, to my community through my platform. And even if that was something just as small as promoting that your local bar has an naloxone kit on hand. These are places that
partying is happening safe. Drug use should be happening in these places instead of dangerously. So even if it's just your local gay bar, having an naloxone kit behind the bar, push them to do that. That's really important. Yeah, just spread your knowledge.
Thank you. Matthew?
What did I learn from this? Just to say yes. And one of the things that I learned the most is that what I thought I knew as a participant at the program, what I thought I knew about partying isn't reality. And so it was a very interesting thing to have kind of, so I wrote the original grant for this, and then I actually learned everything that I said that the participants were going to learn, and that was an awesome experience.
Thank you. Robert?
If you let community lead, if you listen, they will follow. It's the biggest lesson I learned. And in thinking about how being a nurse informs my personal and professional life, is that a big part of my role as a nurse is advocacy. And I really had to rethink what that meant. You know, nursing theory is based on helping your patient heal as independently as possible, but you know, in this case, we weren't talking about healing in a way that I understood it. It's how do I get people to get the resources and the services that they need to make the best choices, which has made me a better person, and yeah, and just learning to fight and make sure that when I'm in those spaces, when I have the privilege of having power to speak and to advocate for the people who've told me what they want, to make sure that I'm very firm in that.
Thank you.
What I've learned is that I am so proud that MAX has taken on this event. This has been, it's been really important for me. Also being HIV positive and learning to deal with a lot of stuff in my own personal life has been a struggle. But MAX has been open and acceptable to it's just an event that has been something for me to feel that our community is finally going to start listening to us and start hearing what we're saying to them. And I'd like our community to be a lot better to each other and stop putting people down and start listening to each other and start giving hugs and start having fun. You can party, but you can party safer. And just look, and this is something that MAX has brought to the forefront and thank you to Matt, who stood there for over half an hour listening to me talk about my personal life without me talking about it, this would have never happened. And I thank MAX organization for this because it's brought it to the forefront. We need to stop discriminating against each other and start loving each other. And MAX has been an organization that I'm so proud to be a part of. Thank you.
Thank you, David. This intervention is yours on the Safer Partying Advisory Committee first. Thank you, everyone. Merci tout le monde. You're more than welcome to come talk to us right now or during the reception. Like since this morning, we've been telling each other, let's continue to give each other love and hugs. And I think I have a message from Michael before you all part ways.
Great. Thank you so much, Roberto, and all the panelists. Speaking of parties, I just want to remind folks that there is a reception happening at 6:30. We forgot to mention, just because I was so flustered and emotional after the last panel, there is a free drink ticket that's going to be provided to everyone who comes out to the reception that's happening here in the ballroom. It's also the only designated poster session with authors present, so I'm sure all of the folks that are presenting posters this year would love for as large of a group of summit participants to come out. So, and there'll be some canapes and snacks, not full dinner, so you may want to sort of like grab a bite in the next little while, but hope we'll see you all tonight. Thank you.